So, hey Andrew, we're here to do a video that's I think been long due between us, but we found a good excuse to get together and create a video.
Yeah.
The inspiration came because a little while back you said you had this impulse to come on the SAS training, which was very exciting for me. And in exploring it, I realized I also wanted to offer you a place on a course being a guest training leader. So you get to come in and play and follow that intuition, but also I wanted to honor like our journey together and have you in the right place in the course. So it seems like we found a good middle, or I don't know if middle ground's the right word, but maybe a higher ground. I don't know.
Yeah. Functional fit.
Yeah.
We'll see.
So, one thing that I'd love to start with is just to talk about that initial impulse, and because SAS is our 6 month training in surrendered leadership and circling, and yeah, I'd love to hear more on that, and then I think from there we can dive deep into some of our ongoing explorations. And I think I will say just briefly on that me and you have been in it's over 5 years, it's maybe even closer to 10. I don't imagine it.
Well, I don't think it would have been, I think we met, yeah, it has been close to 10 years actually. Wow, that's weird. Yeah. 8 or 9 years. Yeah. That just slapped me in the face a little bit.
Cool.
Yeah.
And we were both very interested in integral and in subjective practice, and
yeah,
but we've also been friends and meeting up and staying at each other's places and having these deep conversations, often in coffee shops where kind of crying and meditating and challenging each other into deeper surrender while having a matcha latte.
Yeah, those are it's my favorite place to have those conversations. You know, there's something about a lot of what I love to do is focus on the way that the sort of unique flavor of the connection. You could call it mind with a capital M, right? What's this mind like? And doing that in public gives that kind of contrast between the mind that is unique between the two people that are sitting there, or a group of people, and then what it is that you feel outside of that. I think it's always a useful thing. It puts like a pressure on the conversation too. I don't actually think we've ever talked about that in particular, just saying like, I really like doing that. And we've done that back and forth, but yeah. Do you want, so you have a question? Do you just want me to talk about what made me feel like I would like to do the SAS, or?
Yeah, I'd love to hear, how that impulse arose. And
yeah, so I guess, so most simply, I try to do this sort of concentrated. You know, as you know, I have been a circler for a long time, more than 10 years then, since it was before I met you, but mostly in the American style. But since I've been here, I've also been, you know, pretty closely related with you guys. I've been at the Circling Festival every year for the last 5-6 years, however long it's been on. And I've just recently kind of gotten to this point of recognizing, and we have talked about this, but that, you know, in intersubjectivity, like in practicing intersubjectivity consciously, there's a lot of different places you can rest your attention. And I've always been mostly interested in like the transpersonal dimensions of what it is to be together. If we're together, kind of exploring what it is to be consciousness, what it is to be alive, that has always been and held the most juice for me. And so even though that requires some level of like just baseline sort of surface level authenticity, which I think that training in the United States helped me greatly with. I think I was quite a different person before then. Um, even though that touches on that, I would just kind of skip through that to try and get to these sort of deeper layers of relating and of experiencing. And I kind of noticed that, I don't know, in the last year, and that it's like there's this like band of my own experience or my own presence in relationship that I just kind of jump right over. And there's a lot of material in there that I sort of push off of, or, you know, if I see it outside of me, I'll judge it in other people. So, you know, if you're sitting in a circle and someone's like, um, you know, it's almost like the person who can't take the pressure is the first person who pops. And then they might be like, this doesn't happen in every circle. I'm not sure how familiar people are with circling who would be watching this, but, you know, let's say somebody pops and they're like, I'm fucking bored, right? Or like, you know, they get angry at this person, or like they're just irritated at somebody. And that's the first thing that comes out, and the circle kind of revolves around that. And there's a beauty in that because it's real. And a lot of times if you're just staying on that surface level of sort of, you know, persona, egoic processing and experiencing, it keeps the circle from dropping into something that is really where my interest is. So I kind of, and some of this is personality, some of this is just preference, but I kind of hold to that. So if I'm sitting there, like I get just as annoyed, right? But I won't be like, I'm really annoyed right now, or I'm really frustrated, or this is confusing and painful for me at the moment, right? This sort of layer of thing. And I just kind of noticed the, how to say this, like by holding that kind of experience, you know, we often will get to a place where everything drops and the circle has this kind of deeper quality of presence and relating. And I think, my intuition just tells me there's something about that layer of contact, that very surface layer of contact, that I'm actually quite unpracticed in, let's say it that way. That I can rely on the rest of the stuff that I'm bringing. I can rely on that deeper transpersonal inquiry because it's kind of locked in this being, and has been for a long time. And by, you know, working on that level of the, you know, that level of the construction of self, or that level of irritation, or that level of experience, or however it is you want to say it, what I'm holding back here can actually come into a much deeper contact with life. So instead of, you know, it being a process of coming to a kind of fullness of authenticity, that becomes more and more just a way of walking in the world, something like that. I think that covers it pretty
Yeah.
well. There are a lot of rabbit holes in that, obviously. So
Yeah. And yeah, imagine if you had to tell the full story of where that impulse comes from, you could just tell your whole.
yeah, I mean, I'd be talking for the next 2 hours, you know me.
And but the thing, yeah, I think the thing I've always loved in our exploration, and also yeah, touches a longing in me for that transpersonal. You know, a lot of your work revolves around the awakened mind and circling that, and um, so it seems like in practicing that a lot, yeah, that's like deeply in your being now, that inquiry or that transmission. And then you just start to sense that, oh yeah, but there's a skillful means, or there's a kind of, you call it contact.
Yeah.
that it's possible in this kind of realm of the authenticity or being real, which can be navigated with even more dexterity, or wonder. I'm just feeling that contact with you now, and just I'm not like, if I'm like even more real, I don't even know what I'm doing now, because like in one sense I can drop into this stillness with you, and if we follow that, it's like it's going to start revealing something, and it's most likely going to be mystical kind of experience. But then I notice there's something in me, there's this like little real conflict in me that I could just like move to the side a little bit and hope it resolves.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it's this thing where I'm like, in this interview with you, I obviously want to talk about SAS. It's like what I believe in, it's my work. I want to like tell the world about it. I want people to be interested in it. And then I also have this like, eek, like I don't want to like be in a contrived kind of conversation about it, or like bringing in, I don't know. So I find myself like trying to find my authentic rhythm with you right now.
Yeah. I love there's a lot in that. And that sense of like the tension, let's say the tension, right? Like actually being as present as possible in the tension without making the decision of, do I sort of try to, in an abstract way, communicate all of the concepts that come up, even in an exploratory way, right? Is that the direction to go in? Or, and I don't think this is a conflict, right? It's something that we do. I don't think naturally there's a conflict. Or do I really, like I'm focusing right now because um, the habit that I have when I'm trying to articulate something like this is to actually look off. And if I don't do that, if I'm looking at you, it slows me down. It preferences something that feels equally as important to me, actually more important to me than like expressing myself, right? Or like getting the thought right, which is totally important to this being, obviously. And like it's a way of recapitulating, I think, what I was mentioning before. There's something about, you and I can certainly choose to deal with that tension by just sitting in silence, right? The pull to that is really strong. And the kind of connection there is nourishing and is beautiful. And it would be like, I don't remember exactly what you said. I say bracketing. It is like pushing something to the side, right? I think that's what you said. And for whatever reason, you guys, and I've seen you guys, grow up in your practice a lot in the last 5 years. And the integration of those things is done quite well. And those things being like whatever is actually happening, like what are the tensions that are pulling you in different directions now? What are the things that are real in this moment that you would want to maybe pretend aren't there so that you can do the thing you think you want to do, something like that.
And it's such a dance. Like, I think in the beginning there was this insight we had, and it was having done a lot of transpersonal explorations and done a lot of kind of psychotherapeutic kind of exploring. It was like the thing that circling gave us was actually being grounded in the human seemed to be this gateway in either direction, like just being able to share what was real in the moment and find that kind of human experience together. took us on all these journeys, and we were actually having more transpersonal experiences and psychotherapeutic experiences from this being real.
Yeah.
And then I think what also happened in our kind of early practice is, because that was such a gateway, we made that gateway like incredibly strong, and also missed other opportunities, or we had to refine. And so I think in our practice there was such a high bar on like being real and getting into the kind of real interpersonal dynamics that are always going on, and finding out the truth there and opening up to deeper surrender through that. Whereas now actually I I also feel like a lot of sometimes I feel conflict, and I know it's on the level of real, there's an issue, but I will witness the conflict and not go with it. Like my intuition tells me, but it, like, as long as that witnessing is coming from like a not bracketing away, but it's like holding in my being. So there are grounds to play with it. I think we've become more contained in the transpersonal at the same time as being in the real. Yeah, we're doing that dance.
Yeah. This is so, it's funny. It's so, so like one of those tensions, we tried to have this talk a couple days ago. You obviously know this. This is for anybody who's watching, and kept getting disrupted. Like the video was popping out constantly, like every 5 minutes or something like that, which fortunately up to this point at least hasn't happened. And our conversation right now is so much smoother on the level of like we're communicating back and forth. But there was this like aliveness that being disrupted constantly brought to the conversation, because there was this level of frustration, and it kind of it makes you aware of what is it that you're going for, what are you animated by, like constantly having to drop the direction that you think you're talking in is super frustrating, but a very good practice, and it brought a different quality to the conversation. And I'm kind of noticing that at the moment, because I value, and I think this is another seed for this conversation, like being able on this kind of media, in this kind of media form, to not only display, but really give a transmission of the kind of things that we're talking about, which can be much harder when the conversation is like easy to follow, and is in these more sort of meta or abstract realms. And that I notice in the moment also as being a tension. There's this, or tension or desire, actually. There's this desire for the juice, like the aliveness of what it is that this kind of practice brings to relationship, to your own life, to the moment, whatever it is.
Yeah, as you like step into that real, it is edgy, like, because it was like comfortable on that wave.
Yeah.
Just like suddenly like bringing attention to something that was inside of that. And I actually agree. Remember after that call being like our last call being like, whoa, like that's not usable, but feeling this like love, this, like, there was something so sweet in it by the end. And yeah, it seems that there's a courage to name that now. And this sense of like almost uncomfortable unknown of what that means for our conversation now.
Yeah. I remember that I really liked this. The last circle that I was a part in of, which was in Amsterdam, and realizing like, oh, I kind of like, it's like how much discomfort can I possibly bear? Like, I'm not going to do the most uncomfortable thing possible, right? Which, I don't know, whipping my clothes off and taking a shit in the middle of the floor, like something absurd like that that I would never actually do. But like, what is actually, where can I bring in just a little bit more discomfort and see what it does? Like, how does it animate what's going on here? Um, and that I feel like is part of that. It's part of that point of contact. It's part of that, um, or that practicing.
Yeah, there's like this gravitational pull in me now. This like, and it's like almost like there's an unspoken grail now that was in the other call. That's
Mm.
like, oh, where is it here? And yeah, it's intense. I keep thinking of like past conversations we had where we found this like deep aliveness. See if I can like plant one of those seeds now.
Makes me wary of, like, I think that's I mean, this is perfect because it's we're watching, how is it that we're trying to manufacture something, and it doesn't, like, and I don't think it needs manufacturing. um I feel there's this sense of being in flow, of the the words, it's like the realness of the inquiry and the sense of trust for that. um I don't know that I've ever noticed that before, actually.
Mm. A deeper level of witnessing is coming into me now. I'm becoming aware of now. So this deep. It's like attention, but if I pay more attention, it's more of an energy
Mm.
coming into my torso. I often start to feel this as like deeper layers start to come conscious. Not sure what its message is yet, but it's imagine if there was like anyone watching that's never done like circling or surrender leadership before. It's, I think like right now, this is something that's very possible in the practice where you're not sure quite what's happening or wants to happen in a connection. And so it's like I'm feeling my experience and seeing if the words really resonate. And I'm on a thin line, I can feel it.
Yeah,
It's just enough truth in it to keep me going.
yeah. I really like that sense of the thin line. Like, it focuses and clarifies. And again, I get the word trust comes back, like, um, warmth in my heart. like the tension that we're exploring is like, there's this abstract universal watcher, people we don't know, we could never know who's watching this, and the tendency is to really pop out, and I think to a certain extent we're like yep, yep, and like, can we actually use that tension to power the connection? There's a way where that that contradiction doesn't need to be contradictory, and um but then it's like I wouldn't go quite as far as saying terrifying. Like I said, I feel quite safe and trusting of what we're doing, but there is the sense of like, what what use is this to anybody, and are we actually like ruining the potential of what's possible for the two of us by even having a foot in there too? And my sense of that is no, absolutely not. Like, that's real. That's part of what's happening is we're meeting with each other, and without a sense of that, like it, it's like ignoring a planet. Like, the gravity is still there, it's still going to have an effect even if it's under the surface. um yeah,
And
and I
it,
appreciate that for what, I mean, I think that's a lot of the usefulness of circling in general, but particularly surrendered leadership, is like that they're you can trust that, like you can trust that really, you can trust that completely. And I think I'm just like, it's so that sense of trust is so implicit for me. I think I'm just starting to actually see it.
mm,
And it's not it's not like I trust that it's going somewhere. I don't trust some other experience that I'm gonna get as a result. It's not like a reward, you know. um
to leap of faith.
yeah, yeah.
That word just keeps like popping up around me recently.
Leap of faith.
Yeah, about faith, how it's, yeah, entwined with surrender. I think like as you speak, it just helped me discern. It's like, oh yeah, this is such a unique context because I'm like speaking to you, but I'm speaking to you to also speak to another that's maybe a lot of others. And so as I speak to you, I can sense where you know I'm speaking to you, but also speaking to the other. And that's like disconcerting. Like there's a part of me that tracks like whether I still have contact with you, but then there's also a part of me that's tracking content, like with the overall intention of this call, like navigating those two threads. But the thing you were saying about trust, and that's what's guiding me ultimately. I think in surrendered leadership, we've been in this process where it's like finding what's already here and then being able to speak it. And if you keep following what's here, it will guide you to something better. And that's the like leap of faith. It's not like a comfortable journey. It's like you can be in a very incoherent kind of circle often, and but something tells you just to stay truthful, stay, and then suddenly through that shared journey of disorientation and like this is going nowhere kind of sense, it's like something can birth. And not only can something birth, but you get the also the riches of like, oh, we went on this journey together and we stayed. It's like, yeah, that's also becomes the reward. It's A lot of energy building up in my solar plexus now.
Yeah. I have this even this is a meta comment. So like, what's the, is this sense of could be coded as anxiety, could just be coded as intensity. The more equanimous I am with that intensity, it's kind of it's just bliss.
And life force as well. Something I was also tracking that seems like there was this new technology that at least arrived in my world, but I think it did arrive in kind of culture, or at least self-development culture, that this idea of, or this, we're just going to meet where we are radically in service of like exploring connection. And the modalities I'd done before that don't quite do that, even though some of the like most skilled practitioners, therapists, meditators, that they are so skilled that they are kind of in an emergent. But most of the therapists and meditators weren't quite that. They're like holding a model and a context where you can then explore depth, and there's very defined roles around that. And this practice is more, it's like trusting where we are, that consciousness brought to any kind of human experience that we're having in the moment. And if you explore it in the immediacy, it's going to guide you to deeper whatever, and you don't know what that deeper is, and the more you don't know, usually the deeper it goes. There's something about the promise of that, or that, and I don't mean it's the promise like in experience, like you, wow, this is so amazing, and like when you've been on like these leaps of faith and gain the treasures from being in discomfort, it's so wonderful. And then you like, it's like wow, and then you tell the world about this like wonderful experience about, look, you can really trust being human, and if you really say the truth and be authentic and develop that capacity, it's going to take you on a journey which will transform your life. And that feels so true. And yet when you come to tell someone that, and then you like, allow it to start to unfold, they'll usually hit the discomfort pretty quick. And it's like, yeah, this is what it is. And this is where it begins.
I'm so, this is funny. I'm like, I think almost stubbornly not, like the edge of that discomfort for me is not like, I'm not sure how to say this. It's in like not responding to you. I don't mean that like a jerk, right? But it's like not getting carried away on the subject, as important as that is. Like, because there's so many things that I could say in response to that. And but when I'm sitting with that, it's like they would all be bouncing off of this layer of, like, all of the words would be bouncing off of this layer of what I was pointing to before, like this extremely intense um energy of, like, if I'm pushing off of it, it can be anxiety, and if I'm equanimous with it more and more, it sort of tends towards a sense of blissfulness. um and I think that, let me see if I can do both of those at once, because that is that refers back to what it is that you're saying, which is like, if I'm we structure ourselves so much in that act of bracketing, like the process of being a self, the process of an ego includes so much of that, like, oh, that's not a thing I want to experience. And in order not to experience it, like, these are the things that I do, and this is the person that I am. And I think that's sort of good and natural. You need to know the limits of that to really be like, oh, I want to be uncomfortable, and not even uncomfortable like because I want to run a marathon. I'll go through the discomfort of, like, running every morning, or getting up at 5 in the morning and doing my run, or whatever the hell it is. Like, even that is so contextualized that I think it's easier for you as an individual to organize that, to bracket it. And it's like, no, go into the place where you can't fucking find why you're doing that, and be willing to learn, be willing to learn why you're doing that. um, there's a principle in that I don't think I actually know how to put kind, clean words around, but that's the activity in the moment. And it's like finding that, because it's always going to be implicit. I think you just said this, right? It's like being able to name what it is that's happening that you just can't quite get a handle on. And there's something about that is like, it is the wave, it is the process, it is the genius. Like, genius is making what is implicit explicit, being able to name something that is there for everybody, but nobody knows, nobody can see. um and that's super, or can be super, super uncomfortable, because you actually don't know, you never know, you never have this sense of, even with experience, it's like, definitionally, structurally, it has to be something that you can't get a handle of. So you can't train in it, in the sense of, like, I have a model for psychotherapy, or I have a reliable path, right? And there's something that's more true about who we are as people, and how diverse and how individual we are, and how consciousness evolves, how we're, the way that we're becoming, as a collective, but also individually, something that is genuinely new, something that hasn't been seen or done before. um yeah.
Yeah, it's like stepping into that immediacy, discomfort, or unknown, at least. It may be like a rocky, well, I definitely experience meeting more kind of uncertainty that way. But I think you pointed to one of the biggest like gifts of that, which is like being with others in a way that suddenly their potential and your own suddenly flower in, and suddenly you're learning about the universe, or about at least your emotional experience maybe, or transpersonal experience, but through this friend that you had underestimated in a certain way and suddenly realized it, and that galvanized them to show up in a way that then challenges you, and suddenly you're in this synergy. And it's the reward for letting go more of a map of what should happen, using all our best maps when needed, but it's starting to trust like the human potential. I don't know exactly why. It's one of the highest pleasures I experience, but being in a group of people where it seems everyone's finding their kind of unique flavor of the moment and doing the thing that only they can do, which just messes with everyone in the right way to make them vibrate in what is theirs. When that starts to really happen, almost like the murmuration of a group.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but it seems that's like very deeply pleasurable and meaningful. I mean, I can give reasons why, but in a sense, the resonance speaks for itself. The pleasure of it speaks for itself.
Yeah, it's inherently pleasurable. Mm-hmm. And not, I mean, pleasure, I would even say, like, is a weak, like a weak word for it. Like elation. Um, there's a reason why I think people who are touched by this kind of thing, I think almost everybody that, I mean, this was a part of the when I wrote my thesis, one of the questions was just, how did you get into this work? And everybody that, I was talking to, so people who were holding different intersubjective practices, they all had a story of being touched in a way, in a sort of unexpected time, doing one of these things that just completely changed and reorganized, who it was that they were, what they thought was real, their motivations for doing and for being in the world. Like, that's it's like trying to find a better word for pleasure.
I'm getting shivers listening to that.
Yeah.
I remember the moment I first saw circling, and that was more like a whoa, like, oh, that's possible. I kind of knew it was, but seeing it was like, it was more elegant than I expected. And
No.
and it was like, oh, you can just have a normal conversation, but make it like deeply true and an exploration. But then it took me on a rabbit hole, and like there was like, to be more authentic was more challenging than I realized, and there was lots of ways that I needed support with that in practice. But then I remember being circled by Guy, and it was like this whole weekend I was like trying to find a way to get the best circle. Like I was just like, oh, if I do it before lunch, maybe like it would be like we'll go deeper, and then I'll get more time. And like, so there was obviously my need to be seen was so strong that I was trying to work a way to make the conditions so that I would get this need met. And I remember like just having enough to not just follow that. There was just something
Yeah.
not to follow that.
Yeah.
And then suddenly, after like being with all this like energy and anxiety around this, and suddenly it was like I could stay present in a way without realizing or trying to.
Yeah.
And I no longer needed to like put myself in a certain place. I was like, okay, let's see. And I think shortly after that, someone was like, oh, I want to circle Sean. And I was like, okay. And then from that energy, it was like I came straight into, like, my body went into an embodied expression that I could not normally do. But I also could trust it without getting self-conscious, which at that point I would definitely normally be very self-conscious to look good in front of a group. But I didn't need to in this moment. And then the way that I was met by the group, especially by Guy, just like whatever that did to my being, it changed the rest of the course of my life or something. It felt like Infinity Wars, where in the Avengers, where they have that timeline and it says like, if you change a timeline, you get this new timeline above. And it was like something happened in that timeline where it was like changed my destiny or something. And my whole life started organizing around that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was actually, the first stage was losing a relationship that like was very important to me. I was expecting to live with someone, and then it changed, and that heartbreak was so intense, but going through it authentically led to an ecstasy and a heart openness that, yeah, it's hard to imagine, like previously, or was impossible to imagine.
Just contextualize this just a little bit, but like a lot of what I look for are the places where we're embodying a sort of a conceptual frame that turns into contradiction or duality. And when you use the word catharsis, I've just sort of like picked this up from Jamie Wheel in the last couple of months, right? He uses like, well, you have ecstasy or ecstasis, and you have catharsis. And, you kind of grow either through like ecstasy, so you're reaching this exalted, peak experience, or you go through catharsis, which is like really going down into, shadow work is catharsis, really going down into your shit, really bringing out the experiences that are too intense for you to desire, something like that, right? And I think I just got, when you were speaking, like the group experience is so intense and pleasurable, because if you're constantly getting everybody to focus on where that edge actually is for them, like where's the real boundary between who it is that you are and what it is that you're experiencing, and getting everybody to focus on that together, and we're all pinging off of each other, and that's constantly moving and shaping and shifting, but we're all committed to coming back to that and coming back to that and coming back to that. Then you start to open up that place where there really isn't a difference between what is ecstasy and what is catharsis. Like you're in that kind of a group flow. You're on the line between those two things. You're just in that. It's like an envelope of transformation, which is a phrase that just occurs to me. I don't know that I like it, but it's like, right? You're neither just flying off into space, because you're connected with the world as it really is in a way that can be very painful and challenging, but you're also not just, like getting caught in the loop of like, oh, poor me, like, life is so hard and life is so difficult, because you get surprised with these moments of beauty and these moments of exalted experience. And there's something like, that's the core of it, like if you could name the core of it, like, or that's the result of the core of it, something like that. I think if you tried to get people to do that, it wouldn't work. But there's something about like, no, go to your edge, find what's real, be there, but be here too. And you're doing the same thing. You're finding what's real, continually kind of exploring, mining what it is that's real, being affected by and impacted by what's real for everybody else.
Yeah, the bit that made me smile the most was when you said, I love the distinction around did you call it ecstasis?
Ecstasy, yeah, ecstasis and catharsis.
Catharsis, and seeing that, yeah, if you purposefully try, like, oh yeah, this group is about catharsis, we're going to rescue the pre-rational wounds that we've had, or and then release all these like deeply held incomplete emotional processes, which is cathartic, or we're going to like create ecstatic moments together and do practices around that. And I think you can do that very well. But I also but when there's like no map to like, yeah, let's see just what wants to emerge through each person. But in the beginning, often like what can happen as you're kind of going into a deeper coherence is maybe someone has a deep catharsis, and then quite a few people in the room who are longing for that kind of catharsis or have a potential for that kind of catharsis might actually get and feel pain or like longing, or resistance, or suddenly they're like not wanting to be part of the experience.
Yeah.
But same with the ecstasy, like if someone suddenly like bursts open in like an ecstatic heart, or their sexuality is released, but they don't need to do anything, but they can feel the fullness of their aliveness there, that will also touch the group. And some will be resistant, some will be like longing, and suddenly in a kind of survival strategy to try and get some of that. But it seemed what you pointed to, those moments where the group starts to cohere such that it doesn't matter, like if someone's having a catharsis and the other person's in ecstasy, the other person's just in a struggle in between the two, but trusting that because that's taking them somewhere, and then someone else is just giving a meta-analysis and that's where they're at, but that just feels great, and then someone else is just like totally onto someone and like challenging them in the right way at the right, and you just don't know. It's just this dance of, so it doesn't matter what the dance is for each person. It's just that trust which feels on the true north.
Even that sense of coherence is another one of those words. Like, I think we have the idea of coherence as being sort of like group, let's say group flow, like 1.0, right? Like a basketball team, right? And they're all going for a thing. And what you just described was not a coherent experience at all in that way, right? Like everything is going off in a million different directions. Yeah, it feels like the same fault line, like by trying to make it coherent, or by trying to, and you can also try to make it dissonant, right? People do that all the time. You're missing what's happening. I just got it was very strange what just happened. Something dropped. And I'm disoriented. Like my system just went to like, it just went to like like orienting. Like I'm trying to orient right now, but I don't even know what it was that just dropped that had me be like, that I was using as a reference point. Ooh.
Fun to watch you be like, where am I?
Like, I am in my house, right? Yes, I'm in my house. It's disconcerting, actually. That was really jarring.
Mm. What's that jarring like, being here with me and the imagined other?
There aren't any words for it. It's just, it's more, you know, like there's a
You,
sense of bringing, there's a sense of something, actually, it's almost like something just clicked. And in that click, even though that experience was jarring and unpleasant in a real way, there is also the sense of, and there is, like, it's the sort of groove or the trajectory that it's shot me into feels quite, it's like some distance has been crossed, that I had been sort of unconsciously holding two things apart that sort of snapped in together. They're not there, so it's seamless. There's a seamlessness to it, and like, I think I can't fucking remember now. I think this was in this conversation, but we were talking about how, like, the pressure that creates the tension can be like like the pressure of being in a conversation in a cafe where you're talking about something that is bringing you to tears, um, in a social situation where people aren't expecting that pressure can actually be, productive. It can be used, and I feel like it was the same thing. Like, actually, the pressure of that just dropped.
mm,
The tension of, there's somebody watching this conversation that I don't know who they are. I've never maybe even met before. Are they interested because they're curious intellectually? Are they interested because they want to learn how to circle? Do they want an experience of it? How can I cater to all of those things at the same time? I'm not even sure if I would have said that in that way 5 minutes before. And then my own sense of presence and my own sense of, just being, kind of a pure sense of being that is present whether my experience is jarring or not, right? Like, even if I feel a great amount of tension in what's happening in this body mind, um, all of that tension is happening as an expression of consciousness, as an expression of awareness. But there's a difference between that kind of tension and then what feels like the sort of seamless, um, uninterrupted becoming from and as that awareness, all the way through to the, to the very tip of presentation of self performance.
gives me a, like, things become more vivid in my experience being with you, and more symmetrical, so everything appears more beautiful.
Mm.
And then just I get touched by the elegance of consciousness, or this intention of just seeing if we can be conscious to who we really are in each moment, or our best attempt at finding out what we are. And then by just following that, and the consciousness that comes out of that, or this, it's even more an alchemy of this, like, attention or consciousness meeting what is actually happening, and birthing seems like more aliveness, or it's such an elegant process. And there's not two things as well, the consciousness and the thing that's arising, but it's fun to have that distinction as well, useful. I'm also, yeah, want to look at the time and the real world, and I think it's a good time to start to come to a close. So
this was a very different conversation.
And I would, yeah, for anyone listening who may be interested in circling and surrendered leadership and our 6-month training, this is definitely kind of, I would say, a fairly advanced example of the practice. But yeah, the training is certainly going to be, we're going to be diving into all this kind of exploration. We will be breaking it down and giving people a real chance to practice this more authentic, conscious way to explore and to unravel bit by bit, trying to, yeah, finding that deeper surrender, trust in being, that wonder of its inherent elegance. Maybe just a step too far on that last sentence.
I love that though. That's part of it, right? Like it's a wielding, it's a learning how to wield the instrument that you are, I feel like, in a cross-contextual way, in a way that is applicable to any place that you might be being in your life, you know. And I say that because, like, you know, like when you're doing that, sometimes you're like, oh wait, that was a little bit too much there. I remember, actually, I think the first circle I ever got, Decker Kunoff was circling me in the training that I did, and he pointed out something to me, and this really beautiful expression came out in relationship with one of the women who was there, because she was afraid of me because I'm a big dude with a beard, and I got really touched by that because I didn't notice that, and I said something to her that was just like, it was just the moment, you know, it just happened, and it landed for her. And then I kept on talking. Like, I just kept going for another, you know, minute. And he finally was like he stopped me and just pointed that out, that first sentence was really different than everything else that came past it. And that's still, to this day, that, like, getting that sensitivity of, you know, am I on the mark right now? Am I hitting the middle of the bullseye? And then that, yeah, I think the beauty of this orientation, of this practice, is like the when you start out, you know, that bullseye is really big. So you learn, right? You can do it for the first time and you get something really valuable for you, but you keep engaging with it, and that bullseye gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, and the margin for error, you know, gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. I find that really beautiful. That moment still really sticks with me. I feel like there's a nugget in there for what it is that we're doing.
And man, that also just gave me a shivers again on the transmission from Robin Hood, that the reason he's the hero is because eventually he not only like fires in the bullseye, but he fires an arrow and then he fires another arrow before it hits, and he penetrates his own arrow before it.
Yeah.
Like seeing your own truth come out of your mouth and already be able to send the next one into the heart of that one.
Yeah.
It's a cool image. Well, I'd like to thank you.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's wonderful to, got to be careful with the arrow right now. Endings are always tricky. It's been cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, and big love.
Yeah. Big love to you too.